is a boutique education advisory that helps aspiring students get accepted into top-tier education institutions globally for high school, undergraduate, master's, MBA, and
few things about the university, have a general conversation. While we're doing that, I'd encourage everyone to put in their questions into the chat box, and I'll take the questions in the second half of the conversation. So Stacey, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. So glad to see all of y'all today. Again, my name is Stacy Batas. I have been with the McCombs team for over 6 years now and love McCombs. So really excited to share a little bit more about the university with all of y'all. And yes, I say y'all. I've lived in Texas since 2013 and I have adopted the Texan lingo. I am originally from the East Coast, so grew up near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Spent a long time in the South in North Carolina and have been in Austin since 2013. Live with my husband, who is a graduate of the evening MBA program here at Texas. So I was a partner myself for 2.5 years and love it here. So just really excited to share with y'all a little bit about McCombs.
Great, awesome. So let's sort of dive right into it now. So Stacey, I mean, I think the biggest question that everyone has is COVID and how should they maneuver with the applications. And, McCombs already has this special test score exemption. So that's something that's been on our students' minds a lot. Like how should they go about the GMAT or GRE if for whatever reasons they were unable to write it? So could you tell us a little more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when COVID kind of came around, we added a special test score exception. And I love this question because every MBA program does it differently, which we acknowledge is a challenge for the applicants, right? So I definitely think it's an important question to ask. So we, for the past 2 years, we have a form that you fill out that allows you to waive the test score if you are unable to take it due to the pandemic. And the 2 criteria for that are you cannot travel to take the exam for whatever reason. So maybe testing centers aren't open where you are, maybe someone in your household is immunocompromised, so you don't feel safe going to the testing center. So that's sort of criteria 1. Criteria 2 is you cannot take it at home. So those could mean certainly you don't have reliable Wi-Fi, you don't have a computer that you can take the test on. So those 2 criteria are really what qualify you. You would email us at texasmba@mccombs.utexas.edu, which is just our general email. We have you fill out the form and then we approve the exception. Couple things to note about the exception that I think are a little bit confusing. So certainly I get a lot of questions. How does that affect my chances? And my honest advice is it depends, right? So you're missing one component of your application, which means that everything else in your application is weighted a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at your transcript really closely. We're really going to be looking at your work experience, why you want an MBA, what are your goals? Do they make sense? One thing that we found the past couple of years is folks without a test score, for example, tell us that they want to recruit for McKinsey. MBB may still weight the test score, the GMAT, when applying for those roles. And so that, for example, gives us a bit of pause. Like, okay, well, they're targeting MBB, but they don't have a test score. That's probably setting them up for failure. So there's a lot of components that go into it. We absolutely admit folks with the test exception, and we have it for a reason. But I do think there are some considerations that you should think about if you're going to go that route when you're applying for MBA programs.
Right, makes sense. And speaking of how closely you look at the applications and the various aspects, like even in terms of what the future goals are and how that fits with the candidate's current profile. So what is the right kind of fit that, for a student coming to McCombs and for McCombs when they're looking at students, like both ways?
Yeah, from a career perspective specifically?
Yep.
Yeah, great question. And I think for international students specifically, the one thing that we really look at is what are you wanting out of an MBA? And do you have a goal in mind that is achievable A, and B, do you have a plan B?
Right.
What is your plan B, right? Because international students, so by and large, most of international students that apply to McCombs want to stay in the US after graduation. Not everyone, but I would say over 90% of our international students plan to stay. And so with that comes, you know, H-1B, STEM designation, all of these complicated US government rules and mandates that you have to navigate, right? And so we find that the folks that have really done their research, spoken with students to find out, hey, what are the outcomes that international students are really seeing at McCombs? You know, definitely the more folks you chat with, the better. And just to give you some straight stats, about 48% of our class of 2021 international students went to technology. So that's definitely one that we see a lot. If you want to go work at a tech firm, they're very, generally speaking, the large tech firms are the most friendly for sponsoring visas for international students. Consulting is definitely still there. And most firms are still sponsoring. There are some exceptions. So again, the more research you do, the better. If you know that, for example, Deloitte is currently not sponsoring international students at large, that really shows us, wow, they really know what is coming as an MBA student, and they really understand that. And I mentioned this at the very beginning, but having a backup plan, I think is, we know that maybe you're an explorer and you're not really sure. Like, we acknowledge that there are some folks that don't know exactly what they want to do, but what we're really looking for is, does the applicant have a clear picture of what an MBA can get them? Whether or not you end up doing your plan A, plan B, plan C, we just want to know that you've really done your research.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you said tech is one of the biggest recruiters, consulting is one. So if you were to give me your top three, I'm guessing tech is number one, and then 2 and 3 would be?
So consulting would be 2. 3 is a bit of a mix. So energy, Texas. We do have a large energy presence, but for international students specifically, that's a little tougher because a lot of the oil and gas companies aren't sponsoring visas. So the energy folks we see placed are more in clean energy, specific companies that are really recruiters of our international students. So I would say number 3 would probably be a cross between energy and finance.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
And speaking of the, the plethora of things that international students need to maneuver through, what's McCombs' STEM designation then post the MBA?
Yeah, we're really excited because, gosh, the pandemic has screwed with my internal calendar, but I believe it was about a year or 2 ago, we got STEM designation, which we're really excited about. So how it works at McCombs is you come to McCombs, you start your first semester, which is your core classes. About midway first semester, you're going to be asked to declare a concentration. Most of our international students are choosing, of course, the STEM designated concentrations, which the majority of our concentrations are STEM designated. So there are a couple, entrepreneurship, for example, is not. So there are a couple of exceptions there. So then you declare your concentration, and then you work with the academic advisor to make sure you're taking all of the classes required for STEM. It is very easy to get STEM at McCombs. And what I think I want to clarify with regard to the concentrations is we have 36 credit hours worth of electives in the program. Most of our concentrations are about 20, give or take, credit hours, some less. And so the biggest question I get from international students regarding STEM is, can I deviate? What does that mean? Do I actually have to take these exact electives? And the truth is, you are absolutely able to deviate. There's just a lot of room within the curriculum outside of concentrations for you to take whichever electives you want, which I think is a really great component of the program.
Oh, great. So then essentially, I mean, McCombs is making life easier for their students to sort of be flexible, be confused, be explorers out there.
Exactly.
Are there any prerequisites to choose a STEM course? I mean, do you need to have a certain undergraduate degree or have had done certain number of other STEM affiliated courses? Anything like that at all?
None at all. So it really is whichever one you want to take. I will mention that some of the finance concentrations are a little more structured. Those are the only concentrations where Sometimes there's a sequence, so you'll have to take this class before you take the next class.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of those, and anyone can still do it. There's really no prerequisite to do that. But by and large, most of our concentrations, whoever wants to take it can take it. There's no sort of prerequisites.
Great. And how often do you see people switching careers? Because we have a lot of students who come to us sort of saying that, hey, I've been, say, like, in the finance world all throughout. Now I want to try my hand at marketing and see or strategy or whatever else, right? So how often do you see that and see people successfully making that switch?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is often. Most of our applicants and most of our students are switching function, industry, or in some cases both.
Right.
So that is by and large the majority of our students. For international students specifically, sometimes depending on the employer, they may, it's sort of one or the other, function or industry. It makes your life a little bit easier if you're not doing a full total switch, but I've even seen lots of success in doing full-blown switches. Another thing to know about employers is that, for example, product management, marketing, we get a lot of students interested in those. There are some companies that are going to be looking for a specific background.
Yeah.
Not all companies, right? But there are some that are going to be looking for a specific background. So again, it kind of goes back to researching, chatting with students, understanding what that looks like, because you may be targeting Google or some other large tech firm, and they may just have a little bit more particular requirements for some of the roles that you may be going for. So in sum, the key is really chatting with not only students, but also using our career center. So we have a specific career advisor who was an international student himself. He is now really leading the charge with our international students in terms of navigating the recruitment cycle and internships and all of that fun stuff. And so really leaning on him as a resource, leaning on our peer advisors who are second year students that lead the first years through that challenge is key. Use the resources available is what I say.
Right, absolutely. I think the more you put in, the more you ask, the more you'd get back, sort of environment. So, I mean, it seems like McCombs is a pretty inclusive university in terms of, speaking to your peers, speaking to your seniors, all of that. Tell us, like, what else should a student be expecting coming into McCombs? Like, what are the exciting things? What are the kind of clubs that they can look at? I mean, just a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is a very vibrant community. And I'm laughing because sometimes everyone is involved in so much that we actually recommend a lot of times, like, you have to really make sure that you are focusing on the things that you are your passion, because it can be very overwhelming very fast. So, clubs and organizations, we have over 40 of them. So there are really 3 different types of clubs and orgs you can join. There's affinity orgs, like Black Graduate Business Association, Equal, which is our LGBTQ, Embasa, our international club. There's an Indian Business Association that's active as well. But a lot of those are also career focused. So if you are targeting consulting, for example, the graduate consulting group is going to be a lifeline. They really work with our students to ensure that you're ready for the case interviews, that you understand the recruitment cycle, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then, those are sort of the clubs and orgs that anyone can join, and you can apply to become a leader of those organizations. But I think it's also worth talking about the fellows groups, because those are really unique opportunities for really hands-on experiences. So to give you a couple of examples, Venture Fellows is an organization. You do have to apply into the fellows programs, but it's an organization where you're interning with a venture capital or private equity fund during the school year. There's also a class component with Venture Fellows as well, a speaker series, et cetera. So if you want to research a little bit more into fellows groups, there are a lot of them, and they're all a little bit different, but they definitely give our students a great opportunity to really tap into the Austin ecosystem, work with companies during the school year, intern, some of them are projects, et cetera. So just really great ways to dig your hands in a particular function you may want to learn more about.
That's interesting. I think specifically about, working during the school year as well. I think that's something that all of the students who've joined should also keep in mind, that also, I would imagine, help with your recruitment eventually
Yes.
as well. So that's a really key resource. Great. And with international students, obviously, funding their education is a bit of a concern at times. It can be, something that weighs them down. So what are the kind of options that McCombs provides in terms of scholarship or even financial aid, if any?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So we have at McCombs merit-based scholarships that are awarded at time of admission. So the good news is you go through the application process and you know with your admission letter whether or not you received a merit-based scholarship. So to give you some statistics, about 63% of our enrolling students were awarded a scholarship for this incoming class. The average is usually around $20,000 per year. And to put that into perspective, our tuition for out of state, meaning out of Texas, which is international tuition, is around $57,000, $58,000 a year. So we do have full tuition scholarships. If you want to be competitive for a full tuition scholarship, it sounds really lame, but submit a strong application. That's really the best way. We are looking at the entire application when awarding scholarships. So, and this is where the test score unfortunately does come into play as well, right? It's harder to get a scholarship if you're missing one component of your application. So test score, GPA, your career, how well your interview goes, all of these things really play into your scholarship allocation. So that's, again, lame answer, but submit a strong app to be considered. So that's a little bit about the merit-based scholarships. The priority scholarship deadline is round 1, which the deadline is coming up on October 12th. What I will say to that, though, is you never want to rush an application if you're not ready to apply. So we do have scholarships in round 2. We do. But the reason we call round 1 the priority deadline is because we do have all of our funding available. And then by the time round 2 comes around, depending on the particular cycle, we may have enough money to award everyone we want to give a scholarship to. And some years it may be slightly more competitive because we awarded more in round 1, right? So just mathematically speaking, it might be a little more challenging. So round 1 is best case scenario. We do have scholarships in round 2 as well. In terms of other aid besides merit-based scholarships, most of our students will really resource current students to get a lot of information about loans, outside scholarships that are available as well. So as a state institution, we can't really recommend private lenders, but I can list a couple off the top of my head that I can't tell you that don't require a cosigner that our students use all the time. So really reaching out to the students, getting more information about other funding options. Again, I always just recommend being very conscious of the cost, but also realizing, average salary getting out of an MBA is $125,000 with a $30,000 signing bonus. And so it becomes a little more manageable when you understand what you're getting out of it. So
absolutely, that makes sense. We also have a few questions now coming in from the students. I'm going to direct them towards you. One of our students is asking that how does McCombs evaluate the extracurricular activities in an application? To be precise, could exceptional ability in chess be valuable for the school?
I love that. We love anything like that and find it really interesting and fun. So I do recommend, if you do have anything like that, to include it in your application. Usually on the bottom of your resume is a great spot. If you want to include it in your introduction, which is your first essay where we're just asking you to introduce yourself, we love seeing that. We want to know more about you as a human, right? So always include extracurriculars if you can. It really just helps us get the full picture of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what we keep reiterating to our students as well, that it's not just about your academics and your work experience. It's you holistically that will make that difference. Another student, Nama Singh, she asks, is a deferred MBA option available? Can a final year student apply? So if you're in your penultimate year of undergrad.
Yeah, unfortunately not. We would love to get that going, quite honestly. So I'm hoping that in the future we can have some sort of deferred option, but currently we do not. So we do strongly recommend at least 2 years of full-time work experience prior to enrollment.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Another one that we have is there any advice for someone applying for a second MBA to McCombs? So a lot of students in India end up doing their first MBA right out of undergraduation, and then they work for a couple of years and then go for their second MBA. So any advice on that? Is it looked on favorably, not so favorably?
Yeah, I like that question because it's kind of a unique situation, right? Because we do understand that the MBA that you had probably was right out of undergrad and is a little bit different. So here's my recommendation on it. First of all, use the optional statement, which is our third essay that allows you to explain anything in the application. And what I recommend focusing on is, how does our MBA differ specifically from the MBA that you do have?
Right.
Usually that's pretty obvious, but I definitely would pull that out in the optional statement. We have definitely admitted folks who already had an MBA from, for example, India. There's one actually who enrolled this past cycle, but he had to defer. So he's actually enrolling in the next cycle. But I definitely, we want to know how it's different and how it's going to be valuable for you. So I think really honing in on that, whether it be the curriculum itself, which can tend to be pretty different, or the fact that, just the MBA structure was different, folks didn't have work experience in your particular program, et cetera. So yeah, short answer is, it's not necessarily looked upon less favorably per se, but we are going to really be looking for specifics on why our MBA is different than the one you already have.
Got it. And that sort of brings me to another question about reapplications. So someone's applied a year later, their profile is better and they plan to reapply. How do you assess a reapplicant?
Yes, I am a sucker for a reapplicant, meaning I think that it really shows commitment to Texas. And so my advice is never see that as a negative, right? If you're reapplying, it's showing commitment. That said, we are going to be looking at how did you improve your application from last cycle.
Absolutely.
And so there's a specific section of the application where you're going to kind of write a little blurb about that. So maybe it's just the additional year of work experience. Maybe you got additional responsibilities at your work. Maybe you retook the exam and got a higher score. Lots of different ways to show that you've improved your application. So again, never seen as a negative. My final piece of advice for reapplicants, however, is it may seem silly, but rewriting the essays or at least tweaking them shows effort. And so I do recommend not using the same essays as the prior cycle. If possible, getting a new letter of recommendation, either from the same recommender or a new recommender. Either one is fine. But again, it just shows a lot of effort put into the application.
Right. Absolutely makes sense. And just generally, what does your upcoming class profile look like? What are the kind of, students that you have coming in? What are expectations? Something around that.
Yeah, so the class that just started, we had 270 in the class, which is right where we like to be. 260 to 270 is our sweet spot. We had 38% women. We are usually around a quarter international. So just to give you a percentage there. And I was saying this earlier, but I believe this may be our largest class from India that just enrolled. I think we have 37 from India. So that was really exciting for us. Partly to do with the pandemic, we did have a lot of defers from the prior year come in, and we had a lot of excellent applications apply this past cycle as well. So very excited about that. So in terms of other averages, our average age is 29. Our average years of work experience is 5.5. So 3 to 8 is usually the middle 80% of our years of work experience. And I get a lot of questions about this as well. Is there a cap for any of you that may have more work experience? The short answer is no. We just want to know why you want an MBA at this point in your career, but we have folks with 15 years of work experience in the program. So no real cap. Average GMAT this past cycle was a 708, so it did tick up slightly, and the average GRE was a 160 on the quant and a 159 on the verbal.
Great. Awesome. I think all of this will be super helpful. Just before we let you go, I think what would be your one piece of advice for all our students listening in today?
Yes. Well, and again, I'm so excited to see y'all are interested in McCombs. One piece of advice is engage with us and learn as much as you can about the program. That makes such a difference in applications.
Yeah.
And I think especially it's challenging for folks in other countries to get a really good grasp of the culture and the community of a program, right? Because you're not here, especially with the pandemic, it's made it even more challenging. So engage as much as you can, attend our info sessions, chat with students. We have some great one-on-one chats on the website. You can register with current students, and we're going to be adding even more in the coming weeks once the first year start as well. So that's my piece of advice, because that really comes through in an application and is just as important as, understanding the program is just as important as your test score or your GPA or your work experience.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's my advice, is don't forget about that whole component of the application that is you and why you want to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really, really good advice and something that everyone should keep in mind. But Stacey, thank you so much for making the time today. It was lovely chatting with you. And I'm sure our students have taken away a lot of good tips and suggestions from this session now.
Awesome. I'm going to chat in my email address just in case anyone has any additional questions. Feel free to shoot me an email and I'm happy to help.
Wow, that's really helpful. So there you go, guys. Everyone has Stacey's email ID. And if you'd like to reach out to reachiv.com for any further suggestions, any further services that we provide, please write into info@reachiv.com.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Stacey.
Bye. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.